each time I've been to a church since leaving the church, it's felt like a shirt I put on that didn't fit. That's like the only description that I have for it. It's like, this shirt is too tight. I can't breathe. It's not movable. I don't like it. It worked for me when I was 20. That shirt fit me when I was 20. And now I'm 28, and it doesn't seem to give me enough of the movement that I need in this season of life. And what I love about God and what I've settled with is that God grows with us and we grow with God.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready. You're ready. Let's get this party started. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today is our part 2 of the interview with Covyn Montemayor. So if you haven't had the chance to listen to part 1, go back to the previous episode, number 32, and you will find us talking about the same book, but it's the first half of the conversation. I hope you enjoy the show. You mentioned limits. So the second thing we're going to talk about is roadblocks. Let's jump into the limits on page 130. He has a big old list of all of our limits. The first one is your physical body, your family of origin, your marital status, your intellectual capacity, your talents and gifts, your wealth, your time, your work and relationship realities. So there's a lot here. I want to talk about our bodies, first of all, and then also our time. You were saying that we feel like we want to live without limits. Like, why do we think we can do that? And how does embracing limits help us?
My opinion on why we as a culture don't like to embrace limits is because we don't have to. Like our modern life, modern technology, modern medicine, modern philosophy has tricked us into thinking that we actually don't have to be encumbered by things. I'm dyslexic, so reading can be really a funny little tricky thing for me as I try to do it. And so and dyslexia has nothing to do with my intellect, but dyslexia does have affect my ability to read and to process read information. Modern technology allows me to really supersede my struggle with reading. There's an app on my phone, and I love it. I can take a picture of a page, and it will read it to me. And it's just fantastic. And so there's benefits to this modern way of living, but there's also deficits. Like people with severe ADHD who want to do something that's maybe outside of their wheelhouse, they can take meds for that. Adderall works really well, and they can take it, and then they can do whatever they want. People without ADHD can take Adderall, and their focus can be pinpoint, so they can produce even more than they would have been able to produce if they didn't take that medication.
Disclaimer, Covyn is not recommending that we take Adderall.
Absolutely not. I'm trying to highlight that we can abuse things. We abuse these supports that we have access to. And so it kind of gives us this false thinking of, I don't have to slow down. I don't have to look at myself and my ability or my inability. I think it's very Disney-esque, with this, whatever you put your heart to, you can accomplish. And it's just not a truth. There's some things that I can put my heart to, but it's going to require my heart and my body and my mind to get it. I could have the best of intentions to, I don't know, be a runway model, but my inability or impatience to walk or to put any effort in my physical appearance is going to hinder that dream of mine, if it were a dream of mine. And so I think we lack self-awareness and appropriate self-assessment. I think we are often driven by what other people view as successful. And so we want that version of success. And we're not actually looking at, is it even possible for me to do that? And I think it creates a lot of unhealthy emotionality as it relates to, well, I'm not successful because I can't be a doctor. I'm not successful because I, can't be the singer or dancer I always wanted to be. Instead of looking at ourselves and looking at what's God gifted us, how's God wired us, and how can I do things that honor that gifting, that wiring, um, that will bring me joy and fulfillment and probably sustain me financially as well. And so I think we've kind of skewed what is in our ability. I think our society definitely has no qualms nourishing that way of thinking of, yeah, you don't have to slow down, you don't have to self-assess.
What you're saying is to look at what God has given you and then kind of explore the possibilities within that rather than feeling like we can do anything we want.
Because I think through my niece, and what I would want for her is I would want her to have a dream that's rooted in reality, that's ever so slightly audacious. Like, I want her to have audacious dreams because she's absolutely capable of achieving audacious things, but I want them to be audaciously possible. And so instead of her living a life and leading a life that's, living beyond her means, whether that's her emotional means, or her physical means, or her financial means. Like, I don't want her living outside of those reasonable things, but I also want her achieving those wild, crazy things that people will be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But I want those dreams to be rooted in her wiring and her giftedness and her passions. And I do think, God gives us our wiring and our nature and our passions, and he weaves those things together to be things that will be fulfilling for us and will
Mm-hmm.
bring us not just joy but contentedness. When I'm doing the things that I'm gifted to do, um, i'm not I'm not thinking about the money involved. I'm just doing it because I'm like, yeah, this is great, this is fun. To me, this isn't a job. And I will also say there's certainly been jobs where it's like, man, I really wish I didn't need this money. Like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to smile while I'm doing it, but I really would much rather be at home snuggling my dog than this, like.
Yeah, we've all been there. Crappy jobs. Along those same lines of having limits, he talks about our inadequacies and how some of us have been taught morning devotions
Mhm.
as a regular practice to, keep a solid relationship with God. He gives us a picture of how he spends the morning with the Lord, and then as the day goes on, God's presence from his life has just completely disappeared. We didn't really talk about how this author has been through a lot to get to this place and to teach these things. He was a pastor and realized over time through, other people prompting him and his wife standing up for herself that he was not treating people well and he was not living a life that was really honoring to God. And as a pastor, his spirituality was his job, and yet he found himself to be extremely emotionally immature. And so this book is a testimony, really, of how he has come from a place of being emotionally immature as a pastor, leading people, leading his family, to now realizing all of the harm that he had done and trying to make things right and live a more emotionally balanced life and church. So, back to the devotions. I relate to this in a very solemn way.
Mm.
There's been a few moments these past few years where I have said, like, what is the point of spending time with the Lord in the morning when pretty much as soon as I walk out my door or walk out my bedroom door to face the day, I'm just like slapped in the face and can't seem to get up. And it bothered me that my relationship with God was supposed to have these guarantees, but yet I just felt like I wanted God with me more often. I wanted
Mhm.
to pursue him throughout the day. I didn't find myself having the time in the mornings with little babies that I once had to spend time with God. And yet I was still craving it. And I started to move into this sort of communion with God throughout the day that felt more genuine to me, authentic, as far as I was talking to him like he was a real person. I was asking him for help sometimes, constantly. Um, and then also reading books that honored him. It helped me enjoy my time with God and growing with God as a person. My conundrum a little bit is I struggle with studying the Bible like a lot of people. I want scripture in my life. I love learning about scripture. I love talking to my husband about scripture because he always kind of helps me walk through things and answer hard questions. And often he gives me more questions than I began with, but just having a dialogue about it is always really enjoyable to me. How do we, throughout the day, connect our emotions, our life circumstances, and our spirituality beyond just reading the Bible in the morning?
Yeah, I love that thought process, and I love that question. And I think it's probably really individualized. Like, not only between you and me, it's going to be different, but I also imagine depending on the day, it's different. Like some days connecting with God to me looks very different than other days or than other seasons of my life. One season of my life, the only prayer that I was uttering was "God help me," like God help me. Like that was like literally that was it. There was no expounding. I didn't need to expound. God, I was like, I know God knows what I need help with. Like I don't need to get into this because that's just gonna make me depressed. I just need help. But then there's also been seasons of my life where like I get distracted praying. Like get distracted in prayer with God, and it's very different than the God just help me prayer. And I think there's no simple answer to that. I think it's probably what's going to be productive. And if we're really stumped on that, then maybe that's the prayer. Maybe that's the starting point. Is God like, what does it look like to connect with you in this season of life? Because like you said, there's logistic issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's, hey, I got 2 kids and they're requiring a lot of attention of me. And one's screaming, one's snotty, and I got to get these things done, and we all have to be fed at some point today.
3 times. 3 times.
3 times. 3 times.
I like that you said like connecting with God. I mean, it's almost like it goes back to, am I working for him? Is he requiring me to clock
Right.
in at 7:30 and
Right.
do this? No, I'm not his employee. I'm not, it's not a transaction. So you can take him with you throughout the day.
Yeah.
He's not just there at the crack of dawn. um but what bothers me the most is the guilt. Like I just hate the guilt of, it's almost like, and don't laugh at me, but I'll like wake up in the morning and I'm like, gotta talk to God, gotta talk to God, can't do anything else, gotta talk to God. And I'm like, holy cow, Kim, what is it that is so driving me toward this need to be that good Christian right away in the morning? I don't like that. And I think my childhood church taught me to spend time with God, and that was an important thing. But I'm moving into it being more flexible, and I want to embrace the flexibility of it without feeling the guilt and shame. And I can't quite let go of that.
Mm. Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot. Now, I wasn't as hardwired to, Bible study in the morning, so I don't get that specifically, but I get that kind of almost outgrowing of something, but then the longing for what it was or what it offered. And actually I hear a lot of women who get married describe what you're describing in some way, because like the situation's changed. I'm not single anymore, and I am single, but I'm the women who I'm talking about. I'm not single anymore, and now I have to change my habits with God. And it's almost that kind of like, oh, I liked when I was single because I didn't have to have any structured time. I could just, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to make dinner, and I'm going to do this. I don't have to think about another person in my life.
If that were the
Um,
case, yeah, I'd be eating a lot of tater tot casseroles and eggs for dinner because I'm like, oh crap, I have to make real food because of the husband. But like, if he's ever gone, man, I eat like a college kid.
Yeah, it's a different game. I've felt something I think that's similar to what you're describing in that I'm not currently attending a church, and as of right now I don't feel interested or called to attend a church. At, I don't know that I will ever go back to a church. I'm not closed to it. I'm also not in this moment entirely open to it. Um, and there's things about the church community, or rather the church setup, that I miss. That are like, it's a grief for me of like, oh man. And there's some Sundays, and I work Sundays, so that I don't have to feel this very often. I'll be very honest. It's an avoidance technique.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some Sundays when I'm not working, I wake up, I'm like, well, should I be going to church? You know, like it's just almost the check mark of, well, I don't know. It feels kind of weird to not be doing something on a Sunday. Should I be, I don't know, should I serve at a church, greet people? I don't know. Each time I've been to a church since leaving the church, um, it's felt like a shirt I put on that didn't fit. That's like the only description that I have for it. It's like, this shirt is too tight. I can't breathe. It's not movable. I don't like it. It worked for me when I was 20. You know, that shirt fit me when I was 20. And now I'm 28, and it doesn't seem to give me enough of the movement that I need in this season of life.
Hmm.
And what I love about God and what I've settled with is that God grows with us and we grow with God. And so I don't think God's going to ask me to put on a shirt that makes my body hurt, or makes my spirit hurt, or that I can't move my shoulders in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's asking God, like, all right, what does the new shirt look like?
Oh, that's beautiful. Lastly, we have emotionally healthy spirituality. And this list gives us a very clear picture of what it looks like to run the whole line of emotionally unhealthy to emotionally healthy. On page 168, he talks about emotional infants, how they look for others to take care of them, are driven by need for instant gratification, use others as objects to meet their needs. And then we have emotional children. They are happy and content as long as they get what they want. They're easily hurt. They complain, withdraw, manipulate, take revenge, become sarcastic, and have great difficulty calmly discussing their needs and wants in a mature, loving way. Emotional adolescents tend to be defensive, threatened and alarmed by criticism, deal with conflict poorly, are critical and judgmental. Then he settles on the emotional adults. And this is really where you can kind of get a clear picture of where you are emotionally, spiritually, mentally, as he tells us what an emotional adult does. They're able to ask for what they need. They take responsibility for their own thoughts and feelings. They respect others without having to change them. They're deeply in tune with their own emotional world and able to enter into the feelings, needs, and concerns of others without losing themselves. And they have the capacity to resolve conflict maturely and negotiate solutions that consider the perspectives of others. This reads to me like a job qualification list. I mean,
Right.
when you're interviewing someone, you want them to be an emotionally healthy adult because all
Right.
of these things are it shows me so clearly what it looks like to be emotionally healthy. And we all know people who are emotionally unhealthy, who manipulate, who,
Mm-hmm.
get angry easily. I really appreciated this scale, I guess, like from one side to another,
Yeah.
because I can see myself a little bit in these different categories and I can recognize what is difficult for me. So, like, for example, this whole communication tactic of discussing your needs and wants in a mature way.
Right. I was gonna say that one too. Yeah, like, no, I would like someone to read my mind and just provide me exactly what I wanted. That would be so much better for me in life. Not really, but like I think and feel like it would be.
Exactly. like in the early years of my marriage, it was all about like mind reading. Like, no, I just
Hmm.
want you to know exactly what to do and then do it. And it's like, that's so stupid. Why would you think that you don't, you're never responsible for vocalizing and
Right.
communicating what's going on? So our communication has improved a lot because now we actually sit down and have really good conversations about everything in a mature and loving way without getting easily offended or disrespectful to one another. I mean, just this summer Kevin gave me a birthday gift, but it came with a lot of like caveats, and before he handed it to me he's like, now I'm not saying this and this and this, what I am saying is this and this and this. And I was laughing at him because I was like, okay, I get the picture, but what he was really doing was covering his butt, basically. Like, you don't yell at me for this, when just like understand my intention, understand my heart when I'm giving this to you. And so I did appreciate not only the gift but his heart behind it. I've learned in the past few months, really, like just the act of forgiving people kind of automatically, because they're not trying to hurt me. And
Right.
where I've been emotionally immature before is to just take everything personally, to get
Hmm.
offended, to be hurt, and just turn into a little girl who runs off crying. That's pretty easy for me to do. But what I've learned is this person is not intentionally trying to hurt me.
Hmm.
What can I take from this situation and how can I react in a healthy way?
Yeah. I think that at no point we're going to respond as the perfect emotionally healthy adults, right? Or we're going to approach everything with the emotional healthy spirituality lens. But I think what I like about this book and this framework and this philosophy of like approaching life is that we're just challenging ourselves to view, to try. I am actively trying to communicate needs, and there will be sometimes I totally miss that mark. And there will be sometimes I totally land it. And it's going to be great for me, right? But I mean, if it's received well on the other end. But um, it's the is this invitation to give it a go, like give it a try, like do these things that will yield different results. And if the listener is an adult, it's approaching it in a very mature, actualized way versus from some wounding or from some trauma or hurt that was developed in childhood. Things happen to us in life and in childhood that, yeah, it takes some time to process. There's things where it is valid and it is reasonable to have to take time to process those things. And there's also a very beautiful and healthy thing that comes from when we're able to say, yeah, that happened, and this is what I took from it. This is the good, this is the bad, this is the ugly, this is the messy, this is the beautiful, this is the whatever. And also, I can move on from life. Like that thing doesn't have to inform every single thing moving forward. And I think that's one of the big turning points that you can get from the concepts that are introduced in the book, is there's an ability for us to not ignore or suppress those things that happened, but proactively process them and move forward from them.
I'm just like listening to you like it's a therapy session. I'm not even like,
It's the book. The book is a therapy session.
but like the name of this podcast is book therapy, but today is
Oh, that's
actually
great.
like, it's actually book therapy today. It's all about self-awareness. I expressed to someone one day, man, I'm just scared I'm going to end up like this. And he said, Kim, at least you're self-aware. Like, that's the first step. That's a big first step. You're scared about what you might become because it's possible to make some decisions that would lead you down a bad path. But he encouraged me that to work through something, to face it head on, to learn, to grow, to wrestle with it, that alone is part of the battle. Like when we ignore what's going on, that's when we're going down the wrong road. I know I'm a hot mess, but like I'm self-aware about it. Like at least I know I'm a hot mess.
There's actually something about that in this book. I think it's like accepting your limits, right? Accepting who you are, accepting the reality of whatever it is wherever you're at. Like sometimes that reality might be this is a messy season. Sometimes that reality is I'm never gonna have blue eyes. That was a tough pill for me to swallow.
Really?
At 3 years old, it was a tough pill for me to swallow. And, I love my brown eyes now. And also I love everyone else's colorful eyes that I get to enjoy through my brown eyes. If I really wanted, I could find myself some contacts.
That's true. But you are beautiful. You're a runway model, Cove.
Yeah.
We talked about emotionally unhealthy spirituality, what roadblocks get in the way, and how we can get to emotionally healthy spirituality. Although, like Covyn said, it's not going to be all the time. On page 212, he gives us one final list, and this is defining emotional health and contemplative spirituality. It says emotional health is concerned with such things as naming, recognizing, and managing our own feelings, identifying with and having compassion for others, being aware of how our past impacts our present, grieving well, integrating our spirituality with our sexuality in a healthy way, learning the capacity to resolve conflict maturely and negotiate solutions that consider the perspective of others. There's so much more. As we wrap it up, Covyn, what about this list gets you excited? Or is there anything else that you want to say about this book?
What's really beautiful, the last bullet point in this list on page 213 is it's focused on living in committed community that passionately loves Jesus above all else. And I think when we engage a depth of emotionality, it challenges us to engage a depth of spirituality. And the beauty of doing that as an individual is the coming together of us as individuals, because the kingdom is beautiful. The kingdom is so impactful and meaningful. And I think as believers in our modern ways of living, we have missed the mark on a lot of things. And we've missed the opportunities to grow and to love, not just unbelievers, but to love each other in ways that honors God's creation. That is what is very exciting to me about the principles in these books. We get to live as more actualized humans individually, and we also get to come together, and we get to challenge and encourage and build a community that's enjoyable and worth living in.
Well, I feel like what we did today was celebrate humanity. I feel like our conversation gave honor to who God created us to be. I love learning from people like you that understand how important our emotions are. And I want to be around those type of people who don't push stuff away, but rather, embraces it and works through it and focuses on how we can help each other in the community, like you said. Thank you so much for coming on my little show. It was super fun.
Yes, it was. Thanks for having me, Kim.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we concluded our 2-part conversation with Covyn about Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned because there's more good books to come. See you next time.